Tyler from Pleasant Hill, Oregon, said, we hear a lot about brand name schools and their importance to their leagues, especially in the Power Five. But it does make for eye rolls in the other fan bases. If you had to pick non-name brand dark horses to win each Power Five league in 2023, who would you pick? You know, Tyler, I'm guilty of this. So we run a business here. It's not a charity. So I do talk a lot about the name brand schools, if you will. But I always get a sense for our entire audience. We got people who listen all over the world, and we got people who listen all over the country. And I know not every one of you is an Ohio State fan. Some of you are Bowling Green fans. And you know going into the show, it's unlikely we're going to talk a great deal Falcons, but you listen anyway, and you have to roll your eyes every time I talk about the big boys and you don't get a mention. And I appreciate that. And I can visualize it. So don't think I'm ignoring you. It is what it is. But since you asked, I'll give you some here. I'll give you some non-name brands. I would go first up in the Big Ten. You got to tell me if you think Wisconsin is a name brand. Everybody knows Wisconsin, yes. But are they a main stage power player name brand program? I would say in the last, couple of decades, I would not quite put them in that tier. And so I would say Wisconsin with Luke Fickell is the non-name brand contender in the Big Ten this year. I think that he has the ingredients and the attitude and the staff to immediately turn it around. And it's not like it was totally in the gutter anyway. And when they announced that they were bringing in Phil Longo, and they announced they had gotten Tanner Mordecai, for example, out of the transfer portal to come play quarterback for him, man, that caught a bunch of eyes and ears in the Big Ten, because I'll tell you what people had grown accustomed to. People had grown accustomed to drawing Wisconsin on their schedule and knowing it was going to be a physical game, but Wisconsin didn't scare them. And I'm talking about if you're Michigan, if you're Penn State, if you're Ohio State, because they knew, all right, pound for pound, we're going to have better athletes than them. And so if they beat us, it'll be because we contributed to it. They're not going to show us anything we didn't expect, in other words. Well, now all of a sudden, what are you getting with Wisconsin offensively? And they still got one more year of playing that Big Ten West schedule, so maybe they go to the conference championship game, just one four-quarter effort. If they're like +3 turnovers in a game where they're a 13.5-point dog, they could pull it off. So that would be my Big Ten dark horse non-name brand. What about the Big 12? I think you got to go Kansas State here because they did it last year. So we'll go right back to the well. This is not even something that's that bold. It's not a bold prediction, but Kansas State's they're not a name brand program. They're not up there with Texas and Oklahoma in any sense of the word. But they're good, and they return a lot from a team that, again, won the Big 12 last year. I think one of the big crimes against our tour last year was that Oklahoma State just totally no-showed when they went up to Manhattan, and I was up there. I was making my debut trip to Manhattan, Kansas, and I'm expecting a good game, and it's like a 1.5 or 2.5 point spread, and it's just I've never felt more confident that there's a close game that's about to go down. And the final score was violent and ugly, and it was bad. Now, I will say this. They treated us second to none up there. It was great. As much as a blowout atmosphere can show you, we got it. I loved it up there. I just would love to see a closer game. I know you guys up there enjoyed the blowout. I'd love to see a closer game. But yeah, so Kansas State in the Big 12, Oregon State in the Pac-12, as everyone talks about, USC, as we do too. As everyone talks about Oregon, we do too. Washington, I was a little curious about because, depending on what age you are, Washington's kind of been a name brand at various points in the history of college football. Now, if you're 17, they're not. If you're 24, they're not. But if you're 50, you've seen Washington win a national title. You've seen Don James up there. I think the math shakes out there. So I went with Oregon State. Oregon State won 10 games last year. And another 2 losses were by a combined 6 points. So they only got beat by double digits once last year. I think that was the Utah game, I believe. So anyway, they were close to doing way more last year than they did, and they did a lot. And Jonathan Smith is a totally anonymous coach. This is a totally anonymous program. They get no coverage. And so if they were to all of a sudden win the Pac-12, To a lot of people, they would come out of nowhere. They would not be coming out of nowhere. They have the 5th best odds to win the conference. So it's USC, Oregon, Washington, Utah, Oregon State. They're right up there in that lead pack, and UCLA is the next one. Then there's a drop-off. So there's like a top 6 in the Pac-12, then a drop-off. But they've got DJ Uiagalelei at quarterback, and otherwise they return a lot of the pieces they had last year that won them double-digit games. They slaughtered Florida in the bowl game. Granted, it was a shell of Florida, but they slaughtered them in the bowl game. And also, I would go to the ACC, I would go Louisville, and that's a lot to do with schedule. They've got coaching turnover there, but they probably have the most favorable schedule out of any of the contenders over there in the ACC. I don't think, Jesse, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think they play FSU in the regular season. They do not. They don't play Clemson in the regular season. They draw Miami really late in the year, and they go down to Miami for that game. There's just, let me read it for you really, really quick if you're on podcast. Listen to this schedule. Georgia Tech in week 1 is, I think, in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So that's like a kind of neutral site game. It's in Atlanta. But they got Georgia Tech, they got Murray State, Indiana, and here goes your conference play again. Boston College at NC State, Notre Dame out of conference, at Pitt, bye week, Duke, Virginia Tech, Virginia, at Miami, you're done with conference play, you play Kentucky. There's no landmine, there's no stretch there. Their toughest stretch would be at NC State, Notre Dame, at Pitt, I think would be their toughest stretch. And you show that to an Arkansas fan, for example, and tell them, hey, Arky, look at this tough stretch we play. And they're like, go away. They slam the door in your face before you can even get the third team out of your mouth. In the SEC, I don't have any because I always get sucked into this trap, and I know what happens. What happens is someone asks me an innocent question, give me a non-power brand contender, a dark horse contender. So I'll tell you Texas A&M. Someone doesn't listen close enough, and then they run to a message board and say, can you believe this dude said that Texas A&M is going to win the SEC? The reality is there is no real dark horse, as you would define a dark horse, that can win the SEC. Or at least I don't think so. Mississippi State, I don't think is going to win the SEC. Kentucky, I don't think they're going to win the SEC. So I could give you whichever one I think would have the best percentage chance of doing it. And I chose A&M, but then again, half the people listening would probably classify A&M as a major brand. I would say in terms of results, they're not a major brand. But in terms of resource and capability, they absolutely are a major brand. So my point is, I could see it, but I couldn't see it with the others. And therefore, I don't think there's a valid way to even answer this question about the SEC. And also, even if I try to, I know the direction some of the more casual-minded amongst us takes it